Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lakota Board of Education Planning Session to order. Mr. Zink, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Argo.
Here.
Mr. Horton.
Here.
Mr. Wynn.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Ms. Casper.
Here. I need a motion to approve the agenda. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would like to amend the agenda.
You would need to make a motion to say why.
Okay, I'd like to move to add the second read of public comment policy 0169.1 for the replacement onto the agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We need a second for that motion, for Ben's amended motion. Do I have a second?
I will second for discussion.
Discussion. We have a motion and a second. We are discussing first Ben's motion.
Can you repeat the motion just so I can write it down?
Look at public comment policy 0169.1 replacement for a second read.
Discussion.
I feel like in both policy meeting and our meeting, we've discussed that we were going to follow our normal process, and we had the first read at our second or our last regular meeting, and we would go through the regular process to have the second read at our April meeting for approval. So my inclination, rather than adding that on without, when we're trying to keep this to only urgent items for board action, that we not move that policy discussion to today, but have it on our regular April meeting.
Any other discussion?
We haven't had a policy meeting since the first reading, right? The next policy meeting is Wednesday.
Correct.
Okay.
My only reason with putting this on is that, we have, what's the deadlines, Adam, for putting things on the ballot? I think first one is in June.
June and July.
End
is the
of
late.
July.
August.
July.
Oh, yeah.
August 4th.
August, okay.
August.
August is the bond issuance?
August, yeah.
Okay.
For November ballot, August 4th or 8th, right
Okay.
around there.
My whole thought process is, we're exploring a lot of options. I know today we have mass facilities on the docket, and we're talking about funding options and everything like that. My kind of core thing is, if this is already the direction the board's going to take, I say, rip off the Band-Aid, get it, over with. I think we all have a little bit of some working knowledge of what public comment in this rendition kind of looks like in action. And then we have plenty of resources to go back on, on top of the fact that you've got, YouTube videos of board meetings. Linda O'Connor served as board president, could be a good resource for reaching out as to what public comment in a volatile nature looks like, right? So, right, worst of the worst, how to deal with that. I think she'd be a good resource looking back, but I much rather prefer we have discussions on the funding, on the square footage, on everything pertaining to master facilities as we approach deadlines, as opposed to a policy that has been, suspended, replaced, whatever, for the past 3 years. I think that this would just be good to get over with now, and then actually commit ourselves to, I would say, more serious matters, which would be, submitting public money towards capital improvements.
Anybody else?
So, I guess I'll say, when we were coming up with this version of the policy, a big point of discussion there, even when we brought it to the full board, was how we were going to avoid doing business at these work sessions, partially so that we can kind of preserve what we're doing here. But also, community doesn't typically come to these as well. So I guess from that standpoint, it would concern me to do business. I did look, and I could not find a time where we'd done a second read at any work sessions. There is times where we've kind of approved business of the admin team, because I think that's something that just happens. So I think, I think that stuff is just something where they're doing it, and we approve that and move forward so they can keep doing what they need to do. But it also would seem odd to me to pull this one out specifically. I feel like we've been talking about this for a while, but following the process and doing it the typical way, unless there's some, emergency, which I don't think there is an emergency here. And that's kind of what the policy about pulling something out for a second read right away would be, is is for cases of emergency where you needed it right away. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Yeah.
I'll say we can be polite or we can be real, but it's not lost on me that we have board members who are going to Columbus and politicking on a certain campaign idea and then coming back and trying to change the way that we're approaching things here. I didn't like it 3 years ago when I was a parent watching from the viewing, and I don't like it now. I don't like it on a box. I don't like it with a fox. I don't like it bring Sam I am. I don't like it bring eggs and ham. I mean, we have a process for a reason. It's very important that we get policy right. So it should be a very rare occasion that we go around going back to the policy committee a second time. So I think we stay on this current trajectory.
I would just say for me, it is, and Ben and I have had a long discussion or last weekend about this, but I think for me also, and Ben knows this, it is about keeping the process and making sure that we do the process. And I will say that to your point, we don't want to waste a lot of time. There is no more discussion on public comment. We will have the second read on the 27th, and then at the end of the meeting, take action. So we will not be tying up any more meetings with discussing public comments, because I think we've done that for a while. So that's just my thought. Anything else?
I would just add, you mentioned the concern of making sure people can voice their opinion to us. Again, while we did amend the policy to have public comment prior to the meeting, there is still that opportunity should anyone like to do that before the policy is amended. So that continues to be an option for people to reach out to us via email, via phone, and or via our public comment that starts at 5:30 that we have the registration process for.
Anybody else? Okay, Adam, did you have anything else?
If as opposed to voting right now, would it be okay to move to table it? Just keep it on its normal trajectory then.
We
If
could.
you want,
Adam?
Help us out, Adam.
Right now, this is a motion and second to amend the agenda to add public comment 0169.1 to the agenda. So
we have to take action on.
you would have to take action to add it onto the agenda prior to then choosing if you want to table it. So
Okay.
And honestly, there would, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there would be no reason to table it because the next action would be at our next board meeting. We would be doing that second reading anyway at our.
and in theory, it would be on the agenda then,
It
which would
would
be
be on the
bringing it
agenda.
off the table anyhow.
Okay.
Anything else? Adam, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Wynn,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
No.
Mr. Argo,
No.
Mr. Gordon,
No.
Ms. Casper.
No. So now we have to vote
To a motion on the motion and second that we have to approve the
through
agenda.
the agenda.
Correct.
Any discussion on that? Mr. Zink, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Argo,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Wynn,
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I need a motion to enter into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1A, and 2, for the sale of property at competitive bidding because premature disclosure of information would give an unfair competitive or bargaining advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest, Ohio Revised Code 121.22G2B, and to prepare for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment for Ohio Revised Code 12122G4. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Adam, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Wynn,
Yes.
Mr. Argo,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes, we will be
Oh, ready.
We are pulling us out of executive session and moving on to number 5. Board action items. We have items A through AB. Goodness, you think that's my first day on the job? I need a motion to approve personnel items and approve the job descriptions. Do I have a motion? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Zink, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Argo,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen.
Can I abstain?
Yeah.
Sure. Ms. Statsman.
Yes. Okay. Number 6, master's facility plan review.
Okay, so,
I
as
was
you,
bringing Tom to the table.
come
Come
on,
on, Tom.
moving, Tom, get moving, Tom. Nate, you do Tom, we have the results back from the statistically relevant survey. And, I don't have the survey with me, but I'm gonna give you kind of some highlights that I took away from that survey. Again, not our survey.
I say,
Didn't pay for it, not our survey, we didn't control the questions or anything.
you don't have the actual survey.
No, okay. So, the end number, so the people that were polled was 330 registered voters. Okay, and that's plus or minus, just so you know, statistical, relevance is 5.39. So the numbers I'm giving you are, they go up 5.39, then go down 5.39. So I picked out 4 questions that I think are probably pretty, actually more than 4, but I'll say 5 questions that I think are very pertinent to us. One, of no surprise, is how people feel about property tax in Butler County. Just thought that'd be a good baseline for us. And I'm rounding here, but 65% thought that they're too high. And about 28% thought they were pretty fair, and then it just kind of went from there. Okay. So I just give you that perspective. Then there was another question about just satisfaction with Lakota local schools. So you remember sometimes they start really big in scope and then they get more granular. Satisfied or dissatisfied with Lakota local schools, 48% satisfied, 30% dissatisfied, 23% unsure. Okay. Next question I thought was of interest. Is it possible to meet the district's enrollment and capacity needs without constructing new buildings or classrooms? Let's say that again. Is it possible to meet the district's enrollment and capacity needs without constructing new buildings or classrooms? 42% said yes, it's possible. 27% said it is not possible, and 31% said they were unsure. Then kind of, I think, very relevant to our conversation and of interest was about 2 middle schools or 4 middle schools. The 2 middle school question was posed around that they're larger, they're a little bit more cost effective, they provide more educational opportunities. The 4 smaller, that they cost more to operate, but they're kind of more what we would call that neighborhood idea, smaller in scale. 48.4, I'll give you the exact decimal, 48.4% chose the 2. 17.4% chose the 4, and 34.2% were unsure. Okay, so of relevance, just so you know, people with students who filled out the survey. Okay, that was about 37.7%, 38%. People who did not have children was 59%. That's a little bit different than what, if you remember, our thought exchange, which was not statistically relevant, but it had more parents in the mix. This is, again, statistically relevant of our representative of our population. 59% did not have children in that number. Then the other, I'm going to combine some ideas here. There were several questions that ask ballot questions that were tested around income tax, bond issues, those kind of things. Trying to get a feel of, even though we don't like taxes, where could we maybe get behind? For earned income tax and a number of 0.75, there was 33.5% of people were for that, 50.9 were against that, and 15.6 were unsure. The bond issue with the statutory ballot language would be 31.1% were for, 32.1%, excuse me, were for that, 51.4 were against that, and 16.4 were unsure. The bond issue with no tax increase framing. So if we could keep it just neutral.
What was the
no-
last one again? Sorry.
Statutory ballot language around a bond issue. 32.1 were for it, 51.4 were against it, and 16.4 were unsure. The bond issue with no increase of taxes, so tax neutral, 48.7% were for it, 32.1% were against it, and 19.1% were undecided. So you see quite a bit of variance there. Sorry, bond issue was 48 with no taxes, 48.74, 32.1 against, and 19.1 were unsure. So when you look at when you look at how you might impact property taxes, right? 32.1% all the way up to 48.7%. I mean, that's just a good swing, right? But if you also look in that, there's a pretty hefty audience that is unsure.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
If Jens is not here, I don't want to speak for Jens, but
I would say Jens would say that that's your target audience is the unsure, right? Because those are the people who might feel one way or the other, depending on the communication, depending upon the messaging.
Do we have any breakdown of those unsure people, or is that not something that you have at your
I
fingertips?
don't have it at my fingertips, but I'm sure that I could ask for that exploration. I don't think, when you look at it, there is a sensitivity for taxes for sure. But I also think that people are like I said, 47.7% are satisfied with Lakota. The interesting for me, the 2 and the 4 question, I know that's kind of was our interest. It's pretty clear on that one. And unsure though was 34.2%. So I think that's educating folks. I was also curious about possible to meet the district's enrollment and capacity needs without constructing new buildings or classrooms. That 30.9% of unsure, that's a big bucket as well, right? They're just not sure if we can, what that means or what that looks like.
but also I think that's, and I know that the thought of change is not statistically relevant, but that also speaks to if 59% of the people taking the survey are not parents, they have no idea what's happening in the buildings.
The one of the standalones, and again, I think Fairfield will be a time teller on this as well, but earned income tax at 0.75, 50.9% were against that. 33.5 was for it and 15.6 were unsure. Now, I say that, I'm just taking me as a taxpayer and a citizen of this district. If you said income tax, property tax, or no new taxes,
Who's not gonna pick?
like, I know, right, that's what I'm
Who's gonna
saying.
pick
So I
that?
say that, so I'm not saying that's not a good option. I'm just saying, again, if you gave me 3 options, that's one I'm gonna pick first and then we go from there. But I do think there is enough variance in that of the unsure piece and in some of the unsures of our questions that we would have some work to do in messaging and things like that to make sure that it's clear and simple
Yeah.
and understandable.
Simple.
So that's kind of the big takeaways. I mean, like I said, there were some other questions in there, but I think this is the meat of what we were trying to extrapolate from that.
For the sources of funding, was it like ranked choice voting?
It was
like-
not,
it
there
was
were
not.
separate questions,
Okay,
separate questions.
Sorry.
There was an income tax question, a bond question, but again, they were kind of back to back, you know what I mean, like linear. So they weren't ranked them, but they were kind of tested one right after the other.
okay.
I had that question too, like,
Income tax came first, you answered that first, and then you answered the statutory bond, and then you answered the
Okay.
no increase of tax.
And it was they only were tested earned income, not
They only
traditional.
tested earned, they didn't,
not
so,
traditional.
my
Did it-
understanding
Did
is
it explain what that was?
they,
That's,
I don't know that, Alex, I'd have to, but I do know when there was a conversation about testing the traditional and the earned. And I think, again, Paul's reaction was that's a whole different ball of wax and a whole different level of education. He said, I just think that's gonna muddy the waters even more, so that's why they went, and again, I don't wanna speak directly for Paul, but he thought putting both of those questions.
If you don't know the difference, you're probably have the same thought about.
Stereotypically, I believe an earned is viewed as more favorable
Mhm.
than a traditional.
Yeah.
Just stereotype.
And
I know we're different here, but
And like I said, Fairfield's getting ready to test 1.25. I
So-
think it's,
I'm sorry, I just had a question. So the earned income tax question, was specific with 0.75.
0.75.
What was the bond issue? Was it specific around amount?
It was two. Tom, do you remember that number? It was two. For some reason, 2.22 sticks in my head.
So
I
like
don't-
number of mills?
Yeah,
Net increase from now.
I think it was 2.22 or somewhere in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Effectively done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
But again, I was a little, and again, I'm statistically relevant versus not, knowing parent groups, no, it's not, the two middle schools was 48.4%, the 4 was 17, and again, the unsure was pretty big at 34.2, and I think Kelly makes a good point, if you're not a parent, you just might not have, you might have some education in front of you to be able to do.
I mean, again, like we've discussed, obviously, if I'm just told that I can do everything I want to do with no new taxes, that's going to be my first preference. But we also know the reality is we can't just do a bond rollover and what's coming up with the latest changes in legislation and how that's going to impact our school funding. If we had passed this in November and we had been able to get those efficiencies and that legislation hadn't changed, then that would have been an option. But since that time, things have changed. And so to me, I'm hard pressed to say that I can do a no new income, not income tax, just no new revenue for Lakota and have that deliver what people will expect to be able to deliver with smaller class sizes. So for me, I think I feel disingenuous to say we can just do the bond rollover without having the expectation that there's going to have to be some way to pay for being able to provide what we need to provide to students going forward with the changes in legislation. And
Well,
I don't.
I think you raise a good point, right? So yes, we'll get some savings because the bond issues are rolling off from before the last levy, right? So this is the buildings that we last built in the early 2000s, right? So that's nice to have, but realistically, the revenues that we're living off of pretty much are still the same 2013 dollars that we were getting. So if you talk to anybody and said that, you should be living off of what you were making in 2013, I think a lot of people would be very concerned about that. I think when I look at the numbers that you're showing out, I think it's really interesting because what we got 39 or 40 or 41% last November, which is outshining all of these that were not higher number, right? So I think it is interesting when you just talk about taxes. Yeah, people don't want taxes, but last November, people showed up and said that they would for this purpose, that what we said, more than what this is saying. So I think, either we are, we're swaying some of those unsures into making the case, or it is about voter turnout and who's going to actually turn out on these votes. And so I think we should take that lens into it and understand that there's a window in there that we can play with.
Right, to the educate, I think the
Education piece,
to me, all of the unsures are about
Mhm.
educating.
movable folks, one way or the other.
Right,
Either into the yes or to the no.
right.
So
Well,
I-
this was all in reference to buildings, right? There's nothing about programming or anything else in there that would.
The only
give
thing
us
that
a
mentioned
definite-
programming was, the 2 and 4 about expanding programming, 1 in a more efficient blueprint, 1 in a less efficient,
But not new, this is about efficiency. Yeah, okay.
So with that, and I'm not trying to oversimplify, I'm just trying to chunk this, right? November, I'm assuming is looking promising to put something on the ballot. I know we haven't voted on that, but I'm making that assumption. You tell me if I'm wrong at any time. Based on the data that we have now, I'm gonna call them C1 and D1. 2 is C1, 4 is D1. Are we comfortable going with the C1? I think that was our collective and we were testing kind of the waters, or the survey was kind of either trying to validate that or kind of put holes in that. I feel like that the numbers that we have in front of us would be the C1 to junior high model.
Seems like that was the most decisive question, other than no new taxes on there.
No new taxes.
Are we in a group? Is that kind of
I think
it's not a vote, but is that like a consensus? Are we kind of building trust around that?
I know that's where I have been leaning, and I think that was we talked about the last facilities meeting, and the reason we wanted to do this at night is to be able to have Doug and Ben be here consistently and weigh in. We've got to move. We're
So I think
analysis paralysis at this point. We
so
need to
another thing,
pick one to send to, because don't we have to send it
we have to confirm the option
To
with the
OFCC.
OFCC.
by?
I mean, they could work
Wednesday.
both options. They've shared that with Tom and I, but I think they would like it solidified. Are you going with two? Or are you
And the
going with four?
option just includes the cost of the building portion. It does not
Tom said it to me
include,
really nicely that
Yeah.
because actually they don't care where you put the bill. They just gotta know the scope. Like, they don't need to know what's going here, or it's going here, because they just gotta know that this.
well, they don't care if you have an extra mill to do this or
Yeah,
that.
correct.
That-
That's a separate.
That's a separate, yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
have to be decided up front. We're
Correct.
just figuring out, what are we doing with the building piece, and what
then
is
we
the
can talk
cost,
about the funding.
the cost for the building piece?
The other piece, and we've talked a little bit about this, is programming, right? So what I mean by that, if you look at, I think messaging around what is this going to give our community? Right, so when you go out and you talk about messaging, I would say that with this new configuration, not only do you have facilities, but you have reduced class size. You would have a consistent specials rotation when the building's open, and I'll go back to that. And you would have expanding electives. And we can talk about what those electives are. Is that world language? Is that something different in the high school? We have some time to flesh that out. But I think some decisions that we could make for 27, 28, I'm gonna call it proactive savings. We could take some of that, have some proactive savings that we could just bank until the buildings are built and open, and use some of that money and some of that redistribution of staff to really do those things. The class size, the specials rotation at their fullest, full year round, all the way back in elementary K through 5, and then those expanded electives. We should be able to deliver on that without additional heavy lifts of staffing. So if you have, let's say, some things come offline, that you have that proactive savings from each year, 27, 28, 28, 29, 29, 30, those will be some savings that can play into the operating levy that Adam forecasts. But again, all of those should be deliverable. That's specials. Again, it takes about 16 people to deliver specials. Expanded electives, I'm just gonna pick on world language because we talked about it. Worst case scenario, you talk about 7 teachers, that would be if you took ASL and everything all the way down. I'm not sure we would do that. We would talk about which languages to take down. But that would be doable, and again, have some proactive savings, looking at some of the things that we have continued to re-examine. Chart.
So let's think long-term. If we are saying C1 and forgiving that, when's the turnaround time? When does that come back to us from OFCC to say, like, whatever it is they have to do with it? Looking at you, Tom.
Well, this Friday, we have to let them know what we want to concentrate on.
See what anyone.
And
Okay.
then they actually aren't ready for us because they have to apply a new cost set over the next couple of weeks. So they'll be coming back, they'll be recalculating all their numbers. So all the figures that they've given us are gonna go up, we think about 4%. So they'll be coming back to get our further approvals. Right now, we don't really need a board vote
Mhm.
for Friday.
Correct.
We just need direction. If there's consensus that, hey, we're gonna take care of
Right.
the high schools and middle schools, and then we have it.
And then our next conversation would be on, I'm gonna call it the ballot language itself, the funding source, the millage, all of that. And those are the ones that actually have some pretty strict timelines, right? And we had talked about moving that up, which would then predicate some date discussions.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look at that closely, because in the off chance that, and where's the camera? I'm just speculating. This is not a real thing, but let's say we decide to do a bond issue and we need PI with it.
You have to,
If that date is June 30, that we have to vote on the second time on that June 27th or the July something or other, the first one, we need to keep in mind that that requires a 4-person vote. And on June 27th, we are missing Doug and we are missing Alex. So it will only be Ben, Julie and I. So,
Now, I don't think you can get to 4 with just the.
you know,
Okay, I'm starting that.
that's what I'm saying. If we're thinking, just
Right.
like, put that in your
Yeah,
head.
that's a good.
Just because that a regular, just the bond could be 3. PI, if you put a PI on there, it has to be 4, correct, Adam? Is that right?
That is correct.
That's correct.
So we will need to play with some of those dates and figure out, because I'm not interrupting anyone's vacation to.
We had talked about,
Come back.
we had talked about at the last, master facilities meeting, maybe taking the vote in May and June, just so it's out of the way and filed and all of that. That is not the latest timeline. I mean, we certainly have time between that, but that was the thought. But
Right, and that's, that June meeting would be a problem if there's.
And the
PI.
May meeting, there was a little bit of an issue too. We would have to move that up as well because some people were out. So again, we've got some time on that, but it's fourth quarter, time will go fast.
And that's the funding source vote.
That's
Do we
the
have the
funding
capital
vote.
planning?
So the capital
That'll
planning,
be for then.
we are reviewing that with the executive team tomorrow to make sure it is accurate. The other thing, they have a meeting with athletic directors to just kind of round that out a little bit, and the theater directors and things like that. But that is, they had to readjust some, figures in there from the other day. Adam and Craig and I looked at it and we just noticed some things are gonna clean up, but they're gonna do that with the executive team. And like I said, they have a meeting, I think it's next week, with the athletic directors and the theater directors and stuff to make sure that that's in there as well. And so then it should be live. And they said that they could come to the meeting and walk us through that, or they would teach one of us to be proficient at it so that we could do that. But it is pretty, I mean, the numbers are great. He gets all excited about the numbers, which is great. But the bar graphs themselves, just the visual, like if I'm just a regular community member, not in the weeds, like the visuals are very helpful for you to see like where the spending is, where the pockets of money are being spent and the needs. Like it's a very quick lens, and you can certainly go in depth in that. But even the visuals, I think, are very, very helpful and very, very transparent. I mean, roofing alone, when you look at the roofing bar graphs, it's like, good gracious, like, what is that? And you're like, oh, it's roofing. It's not. Roofing is not sexy and attractive. And it's okay.
It is.
But it's a lot. I mean, it's very,
You gotta
it's
spend
very,
that money
very
on the
clear.
roof.
But we wanted to round out that athletic and the drama and things like that to make sure we had those accounted for. But that is very, very close. Just checking it for accuracy.
So our next meeting is April 27th.
Our next board meeting is April 27th. And then the 13th potentially, as we discussed, repurposing that pipe maybe. We have to check with some schedules and things.
Once verified, put it on the spreadsheet and I'll update the notice.
I'm trained on the spreadsheet.
But our next.
It's working.
voting.
Right, but we could have another layer of this discussion.
Well, what I was gonna say was, before I finished my sentence, was that on April 27th, people should come with the calendars. So that if we have to change any of those May or June meetings.
So May, we had just with the master facilities. I know Doug and Ben's calendar wasn't there, but I know we had a problem on the May 20th. We thought about moving the May 26th meeting to May 20th. Because we thought we would all, because I think somebody was out of town. Yeah, we thought about moving that to May 20th, but we didn't have other calendars. Maybe we did. I can't remember if I communicated with you or not on that meeting. We talked about moving that, but that was not solidified. But that was a discussion.
The 20th is the week of graduation, is the only night.
Correct. It's the only one we don't have a graduation.
And we were changed that because Alex is not, right?
We thought it was important for everybody, if we were gonna take a vote,
Right.
for everybody to be here. Now, again, we don't have to take the vote then. But I think we were trying to, just with transitions and things like that, we were trying to make sure that we had enough time and space because I think it's, making sure VPCs and parent council and communication and all that as
Well,
much as possible.
that was part of the issue. We wanted to make sure that before school got out, we were able to communicate this to our parents.
And the first vote would be the necessity, and then the second vote would be to actually place it on the ballot.
So I understand we need to give guidance for the EFC and the building configurations. But I guess I'm still struggling with you know, you mentioned we want to talk to the DPCs and get them on board with this. What are we telling them? And the reason I say that is because like you're talking about bringing back services, but it sounded like that's until we would do another continuing operating levy.
Well, I think that's the question of how much some of that proactive savings, how much can that save us in the long term plan?
With what we know now, it just stretches it though.
Mhm.
It just moves it out a year or two or
Well,
whatever.
and for me, what I'm thinking is just letting, I mean, one of the pushbacks we got this time was we didn't know there was gonna be a levy on the ballot. So that's why if we're going to go forward, just that they're aware.
Oh, I understand. I
That's-
agree. I'm
that's
actually
what I meant.
in line with that. I think
Yeah,
by May 20th, we should know what we're
yeah.
offering up to the community, right? If we're gonna put something on, at least that's my perspective. My question for the board, and I think we need to think about this is this? I'm gonna use one of these options that were on the survey about buildings. Or is it about how are we solvent through 2032 and beyond? And the reason I say that is by measure of what we're putting on the ballot potentially on November, we're either going for something that will give us the financial continuity to do what we need to offer what we want as the vision of the district and to get us through 2032, or it is something that will get us to 28, 29 when we're forecasting that we run out of money.
Yeah,
And so if it's the latter, then that means I'd be saying, then there's another one coming and we better have that communication, which means we need that plan on as well, because I think it's disingenuous. And I'll say, like, I think one of us struggles is that's a hard thing to say, hey, we're going to ask you for money now. That's going to look like more than a net increase. And then we're going to come back in 2 years or else we're out of money. And so that's why I just want to make sure we're careful of, especially if we're talking about, hey, we're going to offer these services for 2 years, but we don't have line of sight behind that. That doesn't feel safe and secure to me. So I think we have a lot of work before May to get to what is that articulation of the vision. And whatever we decide is fine, but I think that's where we could get into trouble. And I don't want to make the mistake of alluding that this is going to be something that gets us financially stable.
Right.
We have a community that hasn't really voted on it well, they voted last November, right? But they haven't actually had to deal with increased levies since 2013. And we're either going to them with one or we're going with them with two in the next 3 years. We need to be very crystal clear on expectations.
I agree.
But C's fine.
That's all that to say. I'm good with C.
So I think we have the most timely aspect, the option piece. Do we want to keep our current meetings and just kind of live in our master facilities meetings, or do we want to move some meetings now with the idea that May and June would be the vote? Like I said, we really can go past that, but I think we were just trying to be proactive as possible to make sure we had some time, had some breath.
May I speak?
What's the question?
David.
Can I speak to answer this question?
I know that.
I personally would like to see us do this in April and May, so
Okay.
that we're moving this forward and not waiting until May and June as one person.
What she said.
I think whatever, the quicker we can get the information and to make decision, the better off we are.
Yeah, I agree. The question on the existing facilities meetings, I don't know if there's stuff that can be done outside of the scope of the conversation that you were talking about, because I think that's the unknown piece that the whole board needs to discuss. If it doesn't make sense or there's not enough outside of that to discuss in the Tuesday meetings, then I don't know that we need to have them. Unless there's something that from your end that you still need from us that's outside of the scope of that. We don't want to make you drive up all.
Right. Ben, do you have anything?
I know, Dr. Whiteley, I had that question last week about, I wanted to know whether it was ORC or just preference that you usually secure funding before you go forward with actually drawing plans up. One thing that I was thinking about was maybe as opposed to going with how things are conventionally done, we do plan for drawings or designs done it sounds like C1 before we actually on securing the funding. I think just going off of last year, a lot of why I believe last year's levy didn't materialize is because people didn't know what they were voting for in terms of a tangible, what does this look like? How does it translate into student success? How does it translate into more programs or expanded programs? I think if you have a physical plan that people can pose questions to or critique, that this board can pose questions to or critique or fine, and then vote on securing funding for that plan. I think that's going to go a lot further in our community in terms of generating goodwill. And I think it'll be defensible when we as community members go out and speak, to our respective positions on those capital improvements.
I know Tom and I had talked about that as well, like conceptual, even the senior center, the community center idea that we added to the slideshow kind of halfway through. I think that helped people just be able to get a concept. So even if they're not like architectural drawings, even those conceptual drawings, so people can envision what that could look like.
I think it's an education piece too. We have to be very careful of what we do and what we show, because you don't want to get into a situation where we show an exact design and then it can't be done that way because of whatever reason, and people get upset that we aren't being transparent.
Right.
So I think a general, like you said, the slide with community center, a slide of what it could look like. I think to your point, the other issue was people didn't know programming wise what they were going to get. And if we do what we're talking about here, that will be a help, that people will be able to, we will be able to say something tangible,
right?
Like programming wise. So yeah, some sort of conceptual.
And, like you said, nothing, it doesn't have to be specific.
Right.
Again, like if we have C1, what does C1 look, now we're up here, what does it look like closer to the ground a little bit? And then just trying to get as close as possible to what a finished result would look like. Obviously there might be things come up, maybe we find, a corner of our land is zoned wrong or whatever it is. Find pose those concepts to the community.
Well, Tom, I'm sure you're really good at over delivering on those drawings as far as like what actually comes out of them versus the drawings, right? So people will love what comes out on the backside.
Well, there's a couple of things that I worry about district dollars being spent.
Yeah.
And the optics of that. So, one of the things we had discussion with one of the townships who was interested in some property, and if maybe that could be, if an agreement could be reached soon enough, we kind of suggesting it be this summer, then perhaps that some of the dollars could be seed dollars that could be go towards some of this planning, so that it's not a direct expenditure. And I think it works better that way. Then there's also more parties involved and a really good partnership. So that's our kind of suggestion. I think if you stick to concepts that are focused on the inside and have spaces work, I think you're going to be safer and not worry too much about what's on the outside, because nobody really, even though most of your voters, that's all they see. But this is, you need to have a campaign focused on the students and what benefits they could see with the spaces, how we could, provide them new opportunities. I think that's what we have to sell. And so going through the programming, going a step further, we had some visioning exercises previously, taking those and revisiting that, and then defining for community what are the spaces that you don't have, that you really should have, and why are they important? What are the outcomes of having those kinds of spaces?
So looking at if we wanted to take any type of vote on the April 27th meeting, the meetings I show kind of at play until then or the thirteenth, perhaps, if we can get, coordinated schedules. We have a master facilities meeting on the 14th. And then we have, I think that's it. Let me double check that. We have a master facilities meeting on the 28th. That's after the 27th. So we would have the 13th and the 14th potentially. But the 14th is our normal master facilities meeting, it's not a vote.
The 14th, so that's a Tuesday, so
Mhm.
that just counts these
Right.
guys.
Doesn't mean you can't add something or change something. I'm just saying those are the dates currently on the calendar.
And then are we,
And then
so
in May,
let's talk about the May one
the
then.
May one, again, we have the 26th, that's a Tuesday, it's the day after Memorial Day. But I know Alex is out of town, and I think I checked with Ben and Doug that they were available. I think the 20th, and we talked about in the evening, because hopefully you would be back. That would be the day that we would all five of you potentially be there, is the 20th, and we moved the 25th or the 26th, excuse me, the 26th.
So are we talking about the first vote on the 27th and the second vote on the 20th of May?
Could be. Again, remember, we were all looking at it's 10 days. The auditor needs 10 days to do the auditor work.
And the 27th would be the vote of necessity, like
The 27th would be the
did
vote of
earlier.
necessity, and then the 20th of May would be the vote to put it on the ballot.
For November.
For November.
And do we have to have the options for what we might want to do?
Well, yeah, we can't vote. When we vote on the
With the-
27th, it would be whatever option. So we
Yeah.
need to
And
have
it could
it.
be, it could be like we did the last time where we have multiple options.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that seem to April 27th, vote of necessity with various options. May 26th, we would move to May 20th at 6:00. Yeah. I gotta fill out my sheet if we do that. Gotta fill out the spreadsheet if we do that.
So April 13th. Going to be a lot of in-depth information.
Well,
Discussion,
and I
right.
guess based on that kind of survey data that we saw, we're still interested in exploring the income tax piece.
I am.
I think we
I
leave
just
everything.
yeah,
on the
that's what I
table.
thought. I just want to make sure. I
Best
just
thing
want to make sure.
that Comes out to be.
Okay. Okay.
And I guess that May 20th meeting, we'll have seen how some more recent elections have played out too. So we'll have that
That's
additional
true.
piece of
Yeah.
data for that final vote.
Yeah,
I will caution us on how much influence, because it's my understanding they have 3 different significant issues simultaneously on their ballot. So I think
Fire,
looking at
police.
something in isolation as to how it would be reacted to versus looking at it in aggregate with 2 others and how people may take that in aggregate. I just caution us on weighing
And I
that
also think,
result too heavily, because it's a different
I
circumstance.
also think 1.25 is very different than anything under 1. If you remember, it's kind of like 99 cents versus $1. You go with the 99 cents, right? And I mean, even Yen said like the 0.75 would have more traction than even like the 0.99. But to Adam's point, if you have the PI, then there are different increments you can do. No, that's not right. The increments change from 13 to 25%, right? Or 25 to 13, based on what? Can't remember. The increments of the income tax
No, you go with quarters.
was quarters. Yeah, I couldn't remember, yeah. So right now, we're looking at the 13th at 3:00, if we can get some schedules to align to talk about a couple of things, master facilities, transportation, those kind of things. April 27th, we have the vote of necessity, and we're going to move the May 26th meeting to May 20th at 6:00. Okay. Do you want to keep the May 14th, or April 14th master facilities meeting?
That's next Tuesday, right? Tom?
Yes.
Yes, we want to keep that? Yes.
Yes,
Tom says.
okay. Okay.
Anything else on master's facility?
Rightly, it was 2.2.
2.2, yeah, I thought that, that was the number that stuck in my head.
We're exploring a vote on April 27th for a levy.
For the,
The necessity of a levy.
the necessity of
Right,
it.
but following it up on the May meeting.
Yeah,
To put it on the ballot. That's
For
what
November,
that.
yeah.
So the 27th would be voting that we think there's a need, so
Right.
that the auditor can come up with
We've
the
already done
exact
once.
Right,
under funding, and then we'd wait for the 20th.
That's what we did in January, remember
Right.
that, yeah.
my concern with that is, we have square footage, we have C1, we have D1, we see the square footage. I can't say that I have learned, anything more significant about those plans other than the square footage. Like something, it's one thing to see the square footage, it's another to see how that square footage is going to be allotted for programming for classrooms. Are we really decreasing, the classroom size burdens, that teachers are facing? Just kind of seeing a complete breakdown. Again, I'm someone who's a hands-on learner, seeing conceptuals on how that square footage is going to be broken down into programming classrooms, whatever it is, what those spaces are going to be used for. And to me, I haven't learned anything more about that than what I knew in January, February. If we can do that in April and May, then, maybe voting on those would be a little bit more comfortable with. I like the May, June timeline, and we have June 20th?
27th.
27th was.
The problem with June 27th is if there's any kind of.
29.
Any kind of PI in there, we don't have enough people
Right,
to make it work, to make that vote work. Would be the only issue, we'd have to change that. Why don't we see what we can come up with on the 13th?
Yeah.
Next Monday,
Mhm.
next Monday.
We do have, what's called a program of requirements.
Mhm.
That was created, but that was created with the higher enrollment numbers, so we have to revisit it with the new enrollment numbers, so I think by next Tuesday, we could have program requirement. Not that it's set in stone, but it gives you a pretty good breakdown of the number of classrooms and the types of spaces, potentially realistic.
okay, I appreciate it.
So that might be helpful.
Anybody have anything else?
Just a question on that, Tom, if we're also talking about it potentially the evening of the 13th, would that be a better time to go over that when everybody's present than when only 3 of us are at the meeting on Tuesday? Could we do
We
that?
can certainly aim for that. Tom, do you think that's possible to have that by the 13th, that Monday?
Instead of the 14th?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so, I just don't want to, yeah. So I will.
Bring
confirm-
snacks, let's go. Let's go.
I will confirm that we can make that other conversation happen on that day as well that we discussed. Hopefully we can, but either or, even if we can't, we'll still go with the 3 o'clock, and that'll be the icing on the cake if we can talk about transportation too. Okay, all right.
Anybody have anything else? All right, then we'll take the motion to adjourn. Anybody?
So moved.
We're not in a hurry, apparently.
For a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Adam, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Oria,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Horton. Yeah. David,
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yeah, thank you all.